Cool. Okay, let's get cracking. Thanks for your time. Thanks for coming. Apparently, if you put Hyrox in the title of everything, everybody wants to come and have a look. So here we are. Over 500 people signed up for this. Apparently, Hyrox is trending at the moment. Who knew? So, training for it, coaching it. If you're here for answers and magic bullets, you know us, you're in the wrong place. However, hopefully this will stretch your brain around what it is and how best to train your clients for it. Okay? It should be a growth in awareness around the whole thing. And we'll have a chat around that towards the end. So let me just present what I've got to talk about. Save up any questions or throw them in the chat box as we go, if they pop up. And then I'll try my best to come around and answer them all as we get towards the end of the call. So that's how we're going to roll. Just a sec, more people coming in. Right. So first things first, top of the shop. What is Hyrox? We must define it. If we're not defining it, if we're not clear on what it is, then how on earth can we train for it? So we know the event. Let me just make this full screen so we can see the whole thing. There we go. We know the event. We don't need to go into detail there. But then let's just try and put some definition on it. It's a fixed piece. That in itself should focus our mind around what we're doing for our training in it. If we're not training towards the fixed elements of this thing, we're probably wasting our time as far as progression of Hyrox is concerned. And don't forget, that's the focus here. Fuck. All you folk who are coaches and you're late. I don't know. What happened to 15 minutes early is on time? So it's fixed. It's mixed. There are mixed elements throughout. It's low skill. So what's in there as skill pieces, they're not high skills. They're not complex. It's grunt work. It's a capacity test, and it's generally completed between 50 and 90 minutes. So those are the things we know. Straight away, then, when we're looking at those things, we can start to think about how we train towards it. As a description, it's an opportunity to test physical expression for fitness enthusiasts to elite athletes alike and everybody in between. As they say, it's sport for everybody. And I would tend to agree. I think it's pretty cool. I think it's a great opportunity for many people. It can be the park run for those who want to go and participate with a few more elements and a bit more interest. And at the same time, at the other end of the spectrum, it can be a full threshold test for those who can go there. So we know the event. We've got some sort of definition around it, and we can describe it a little bit also. Which leads us then to, okay, what are the key performance indicators? What are we aiming towards in Hyrox? These people coming late are putting me off. Just a sec. Fuck. Sorry, folks. I'll get in my flow now. I'll just stop letting people in. So, KPIs, movement quality, top of the shop. Muscle endurance is probably the fundamental element here within Hyrox. That means that you must have capacity to the functional volume that's required for Hyrox to be as aerobic as possible throughout the time frame. We're aiming to be repeatable so that we can keep that high level of effort, that high level of output. It must be repeatable. We don't want to fly and die. For the time frame that's involved, for those of you that have done the test, that have worked for this time frame, going out too hard and then trying to survive for the rest of it is unpleasant. for this length of time. So muscle endurance is key. Movement quality is a requirement, is the prerequisite to muscle endurance. The skill must be good. It must be refined. If the skill's not refined, if the movement's not refined, as we start to stretch out and test the volume, it will break down. And so then starting with movement quality with your clients as a foundational element is fundamental to their success. So as I've said there, muscle endurance is key. We can't have muscle endurance without movement quality, and athletic potential is governed by movement quality because we're looking at efficiency here in coordination. Efficiency being the ultimate, really. How efficient can we be in those movements? And that's something we can refine over time through refinement of movement quality. Another KPI, capacity. Metabolic capacity. I think we can all agree there's a requirement for a high level of aerobic capacity here. Or, let me say that a different way. The higher your aerobic capacity, the better your ability to express this as a test. Sprinkled in with some threshold capacity at the top level allows you to flirt with that high level. And we'll talk to how we can implement that within the program design, within your periodization for this sport as we get further down the road. We need capacity and muscle endurance, as I've just mentioned. So whilst movement quality is a KPI that feeds into muscle endurance, we then need to develop said muscle endurance. And that's in line with the functional volume that's required within this test. And that's the benefit of doing a fixed test. Those numbers are always going to stick. So we know how far or how much of each movement we've got to do. And so from a program design point, it's really a reverse engineering from the test back to where they currently are now, where the client currently stands and what they can currently do. And when we talk about muscle endurance here, we're talking about repetition of exactly the same skill. So the skill remains. The movement quality is the metric of success. Is your muscle endurance sufficient that it can withstand the fatigue and the skill still holds up? In capacity as well, we do have strength capacity required. There's a base level of strength within the test. You must be able to move the sled. You must be able to squat and then dynamically drive the ball vertically in the wall ball. You must be able to lunge the bag. You must be able to carry the kettlebells in the farmer's walk, etc., etc. There is a strength element required. So those are the capacity pieces. Fitness IQ. This is one that's probably less thought about, but is arguably one of the most important things, especially as we move away from participation in this towards performance. The main skill within Hyrox is pacing. That's the main fitness IQ element. So then, when we think about the capacity, the aerobic capacity, what we're trying to refine within that is the skill of pacing. And as we know, with any skill, that can only be refined through practice. So from a fitness IQ perspective, we're looking to increase awareness there around pacing, in which case we need to practice feelings and what is maintainable, what is flow, what is of benefit here. How fast can I go before the whole thing starts to break down? How fast can I go and maintain muscle endurance? How fast can I go and these skills hold up? With that in mind, still within fitness IQ, decision-making and intuition within it. So the ability of the person taking part to be able to be agile within the scenario. As we know, each test is not going to be the same. There are variables in courses, of course, but then as well, there's going to be variables in environment. There's going to be variables of time, of the way they feel, stress levels, etc., etc. So how the whole thing plays out each time is going to be slightly different. So the participants' ability to make decisions on the back of that, around their intuition, around their skill of pacing, around how well they know themselves, their fitness IQ, is going to be gold as far as them getting the most out of each effort, each test. That's all relating then to the competency continuum, which is this piece. It goes from unconscious incompetence. We don't know what we don't know. We're blind. Awareness then gives us conscious incompetence. We now know what we don't know. Through practice and action, we reach conscious competence, where we're now refining our intuition. And then over time, then this whole thing becomes autonomous. But we know how it feels. We know how the skills feel. We do it without thinking. That's where we can really put the foot down and start to push the intensity, safe in the knowledge that we're probably going to make the right decisions subconsciously and our skills are going to hold up to the test. I table that as a framework to be able to place your client so that you can shape your prescriptions and your conversations around this whole thing accordingly. If your client's brand new and they've never done one before and their experience in this realm is low, they're going to be unconsciously incompetent. And so how you approach the test is going to be different to the person that's further up the line and everything in between. So your client's competence here is key and it must be considered. So we can't say this is how you do Hyrox and this is what you should be thinking about for everybody. There's probably going to be different elements that are plugged in at different stages around these levels of competence. Back to the KPIs. The potential to adapt. So this is on you and your coaching skill to try and establish what the client's potential for adaptation is. How much can they change? That relates to how resilient are they? Stemming from that, it'll be a genetic thing. So we all have what we have. We've got what we've got, and we can work with that stuff. We will all have our natural limitations within that from a genetic point of view. But on top of that, and this is the thing that we can collaborate with the client in order to upgrade, lifestyle pieces. So managing stress load, which in our coach's mind should lead towards increasing the ability to push the needle a little bit in training. We can handle a bit more because we can recover from it, because our general stress load outside the gym is lower. So we've managed that. So resilience is a big key. How resilient is our client? Therefore, how much can they adapt to? How much can they handle? Another piece, a big piece in potential to adapt, is having the will. Do they want to? If they don't, it's not a problem. And a lot of coaches will have a problem with this. Why don't you want it? Well, probably because it doesn't mean too much. Maybe your client is happy doing Hyrox for the social, to do it with a friend. Maybe they just like the thing and they're not really bothered about getting a better time. Who knows? Whatever the reason. But sometimes they won't have the will to want to adapt even more. Because to continue to grow, you've got to be willing to put stress on the body, as we know, beneficial stress to drive adaptation. As coaches, then, we want to be digging into the client's intent, and we'll go into that shortly. What are their values and priorities in life in general? And therefore, where does Hyrox sit within it? Is it a hobby piece? Is it a park run to them? Which is absolutely fine. Perhaps they've got a busy job. Perhaps they've got a busy time at home. Perhaps this is a bit of escape. But you're trying to drive them towards this sporting performance. And they're like, fucking hang on. I don't care that much. I'm just doing this for a bit of fun. So we need to be clear on that in order to understand how we need to relate to the client within this setting. So those are the KPIs. So from there then, how and where do we start? I alluded to it then. We must start with the client. Folks, can you just make sure your mics are off, please? Thanks. Who plus what plus why equals how. Everything before the how here, everything before the equals belongs to the client. Who they are. So everything within their essence, experience, and expression. What they want to do. That's their function. Their goals will be in there. Maybe goals that lie beyond the gym. And then why? What is their intention? It's those three things that will dictate our prescription. To the point about trying to shoehorn your client who's doing this for fun into going sub 60 minutes because you believe that'll look good on your coaching resume. And they're like, fuck off, coach, I have no interest. I'm good with 115. Thanks. Okay? So you need to get to know the client. You need to get to know what's driving them in order to prescribe accordingly. Again, this is a big piece that gets missed. To my point at the start, I'm not going to give you answers how to get people better at Hyrox. What I'm going to give you is some thought processes and principles that will enable you to make better decisions based on the clients that you're serving. Okay? And it should be them first. This should be client-centric, not Hyrox-centric. So, how do we do that? We have to start with an investigation. You might call it assessment. In our language, it's investigate, and it's the first out of the 4 I's. And we'll work through those. So you'll find these in FFC. Investigate. So it's the Hyrox assessment. Client intent first and foremost. Is it for participation? Do they just want to give it a go? And why would that be a problem? I ask you that. Or is it for performance? Because if it's for performance, then the whole thing shifts. It shifts from an outlet at a weekend to sport, where the prescription becomes a little more rigid. And we have to agree, and we have to be clear with the client, that in order to go after performance, we probably have to let go of some lifestyle pieces, i.e. things that point towards health. Because as we know, the closer we get to the highest expression in sport, the further away we move from long-term health. And that's not me being a party pooper, that's just the reality. And if we're not tabling that with the client, then we're doing them a misservice. Because the reason I mentioned that, they might be going after a performance goal without the awareness that that's going to be the price they pay. And it's our role as coaches, as professionals, as experts, that's why they're coming to you, to lay that truth on the table. It's cool that you want to perform here. I'd love to help you. Are you clear that these are the things that you're going to have to, that you might have to give up as a result? Okay. With that in mind, they must have a good reason for going either way. Or do we actually figure out that their reasons are borrowed and they're just going along with maybe what their pal thinks, who they've signed up for? Folks, can you just switch your mics off, please? Thanks. I guess I'm going to be saying that all the hour. So we need to dig into that, because clarity there will allow us to coach better. It'll allow us to position the whole thing better. It'll allow us to create something that means something more to the client, so they're going to adhere to it more. Just a sec. Let me just try. There we go. So client intent is key. Top of the shop. That's what we're trying to get out of the assessment. Why are we doing this? What are you after? Once you've defined that, we then need to define what their success is. So we can't assume or project. But clarity here is key for alignment for client, and it'll help us guide following establishment of the starting point. So we can't suggest that this would be a good reason for you to do Hyrox. This would be a good outcome for you. Now, we can help with that. We can have those conversations, of course, but it's not for us to decide. The client's doing this for them, hopefully. And if they're not, then they shouldn't be. And we should have that conversation also. But if they have decided that this is for them and because they can, great. Then we need to be clear on what they define as success. It might not be, here's a challenging piece, it might not be objective. It might not be a time. It might be a feeling or a sense. I felt great doing it. I felt more confident doing it, maybe. And I'm not being airy-fairy here, I'm just being realistic. There's going to be multiple reasons why clients do this. Us getting clear on that as coaches is going to help us, okay? So, again, don't assume, don't pin this on the client. Let them think about it. Give it them as their responsibility. What success do you want to get out of this? That'll refine their intentions. This whole thing is an attempt to try and find the starting point. So as I've mentioned there, if they've done Hyrox before, previous Hyrox data is gold. But if they've not, things like what's their training age? So how long have they been training? What's their training level? As in, are they beginner? Have they been training between 1 to 3 years? Are they intermediate, sort of 3 to 7 years? Or are they more advanced, sort of 7 and 10 years plus? Again, that will dictate with all the principles that I'm assuming you already know in how we're going to formulate their plan and indeed what they're capable of, and therefore what's meaningful in the process. Again, if it's their first time, perhaps we can come up with or establish some specific relatable metrics of success. Maybe that's pulling out the functional volume from the test and seeing if they can actually do it as a prerequisite. So the point there, do they have the functional volume in the bag? Can they run 8K? Can they push the sled? Can they lunge the bag and do it for that distance? Same with the burpees. Can they wall ball that many reps with that weight, etc.? Can they do it? So can they play the game? If not, any program design protocols around intensities or pacing is a waste of time. They need to earn the functional volumes first. Simple as that. So if they've not got that in the bag, that's the starting point. Okay? Dead simple. Makes our job easy. You're going to need to run 8K on the day, and that's going to be under fatigue. So you're going to need to run at least 8K outside of it. And then hope that that stands up to the fatigue that you face on the day. And so on and so forth. So top of the shop, don't get fancy with your prescriptions if they've not got the functional volume in the bag. Go there first, and then we can get into pacings, intensities, etc., etc. Performance tests. As I just mentioned there, sort of alluded to, these really would only stand until the first Hyrox is complete, and then anything would be superseded by the actual event performance. And I've said there in the arena as a reason for. And what I mean by that is we know the drill. And I'm sure if we've participated in sport, specifically team sport, where we've trained with others, we'll have trained with people who are great in training. Or we've worked, perhaps you've had clients who are great in training. Maybe it's in the sport of fitness. Maybe it's even in Hyrox. All metrics in training point towards this time or this success or this amount of progress. And when they get there on the day, can't hack it. Or things change, they change, tighten up, whatever it might be. So that's why I say that once we've done the test, that should be our line in the sand. And hear the language there. Test. We should test infrequently. we should train more. And we'll go into what that looks like as far as periodization for the season that you come up with for your clients. But progress is earned and developed in training, not continually testing. So as we'll all know, getting better at a 5K will not be the result of continuing to try and do a 5K. There's a requirement to break it down, work on pacings and intensities that sit within it, and then gradually piece it all back together. There's a training methodology that goes towards it, and a development of an aerobic capacity and threshold. And it's the same here. Okay? So be careful with the amount we test. I see a lot of Hyrox sims, and I say that because that's the language used. A lot of people are doing them on a weekend basis in the hope that the training that happens in the week will show progress every Saturday when they come around to have another stab at it. Chances are slim, and I'll explain why shortly. Okay, so we've established a starting point. We're clear on intentions, and we're clear on a definition of success. Then what? How does this relate to doing of the do? Oops. Well, now with the information that we've gathered, we need to integrate it. This tends to be the piece of the puzzle that is missed in most coaching practices. We went through this yesterday on level 3 and a little bit on FFC as well. This is the point where we sort. So we sort the information in order to try and establish some priorities. We must establish priorities for the client, not for us and what we think should be priority for them moving forward based on our knowledge of Hyrox. It's them. Remember, who plus why plus what equals how, not the other way around. So define their start point. We then have the opportunity to legitimize or check the goal. So it's a feedback loop around. Based on where they're starting, is their goal actually valid based on what we've got to play with? And once we're clear on that, then we can organize the outcomes of the investigation with the attempt and the idea to move the client forward with the aim of creating an optimal challenge at each step. Not rushing them forward. Not putting a rocket up their arse and trying to fast track the whole thing. They might survive and they might see some gains. They'll probably be beginner gains. But that's not what a lifetime of progress in aerobic capacity and movement quality are going to be built upon. So outside of Hyrox, you're setting them up for a fail. And even within their development of their ability to express Hyrox, you're probably setting up for a fail as well. So rather, steps along the way. And we must be honest with that. So based on where they're starting, we can then get a sense of how the timeframes involved for progression, how long we think this might take to get to a certain point. And then again, like I said, we're able to create some validity around the goal. So establishing the time frame. So this is the time frame that we've got to work with. So it's the date of the actual competition, the test, and then we reverse engineer back to now. So we have an idea of the frame of time. And then we can plug the priorities in accordingly. So are we working towards functional volume, or are we looking to play with intensities now, based on what we found in those assessment pieces? And what's the definition of success here? At that point, we can start to outline the plan within that time frame. So we can think about phases of training. And this is just general sport periodization. Note the word, sport periodization. If your client is in this for participation and for fun, then you can create an idea of this within your program, but careful shifting them towards sport and performance as an outcome. Because like we said before, there's going to be a price to pay for that. And if this is participation and fun, which adds to a lifestyle piece, that you're actually going to be moving in the wrong direction. So if we're clear this is for performance and we're going down the sport route, we might want to think about these as some phases of training. Accumulation, into intensification, into pre-comp, and then into the test itself. Nothing new there. They're not ours, just generally accepted periodization of sport. And then we think about how we progress. So the rate of progression based on our assessment or our investigation as to how quickly they can adapt. Based on the priorities, what is that progress going to look like in type? So what are we actually looking to progress specifically? And then the third piece, how do we measure it? So how do we objectify that progression? And that's for our own knowledge and our own feedback as far as the success of the program design and our coaching, but also to give the client a sense of progression as well, beyond what they feel. Okay? So we're learning and refining there as we gather objective information. So establish priorities, establish the time frame, outline the plan within that time frame, and then think about how we're going to progress. Teaching your client how to train will maximize their athletic potential. Teaching your client how to train will maximize their athletic potential. The first word there is key. Teaching them. Remember, as we say, education is something you do with someone, not to someone. You're looking to empower them, give power to them, not power over them. So this is not a dictatorship. You're not just driving your Hyrox program down their throat, despite what they want to do with it. You're teaching them. Teaching them how to train in this setting will pay dividends, because teaching them how to train will increase their awareness and therefore their understanding, which is going to feed into their intuition and their fitness IQ when they come to actually compete. Conversely, if we go the other way, not teaching them and just delivering your program or sending them on through software and not having any input will probably see them getting this wrong. They'll be pushing too hard, too soon, surviving, and then when it comes to comp day, the whole thing's going to fall down, and it's going to be an hour to an hour and a half of shitfest. It's going to be grim for them. So teaching them how and what this all means and how it should feel in training is absolutely key. So that's our role. Don't forget that. Remember, our role is to attend to our clients. Don't just fire programs out and expect them to work and then blame the client for that not being the case. Teach them. Back to the start. What's the truest expression of Hyrox? It's aerobic threshold. So it can't be survival. You can't survive for that long. The stores of the fuel that enable survival only last so long. You will run out. We know that. You'll burn through those sugars. You'll end up in a bath of lactate before you know what to do with it. And then you're in a horrible state for the rest of the time. So we're trying to remain at that level, at that aerobic level, but right at the top. So again, back to teaching your client. We're teaching them where that level is, what they can withstand, what they can maintain, what is repeatable for this time frame, what is repeatable for each movement that sits within it. Again, it's relatively easy to think about because the movements are fixed. So how does each and every station feel for you? Where is your level within it? That's going to dictate how they approach the whole thing, paces that are used on the ergs, paces that they run at, how they break down the reps in the other elements. It all needs to be considered rather than just going into it mindlessly and hoping that I'm going to be able to hang on. Or worse, following somebody else. So if we don't educate our clients here in their own world, in their own reality as it stands right now, there's a high chance that they're going to get it wrong. Or the other way, they're going to massively underperform with caution in mind, and they're going to come out like, yeah, it was all right. It's a bit boring. Wasn't any really meaning or challenging. So think about the aerobic threshold as we go into what these phases of training look like. Accumulation then. This is all about developing an aerobic base. First and foremost. I just paused there because that's super important. And the way I see people training for Hyrox, despite the fact that it's in 3-4 months' time, they're going balls to the wall straight away. They've just finished the Hyrox and all of a sudden they're handing themselves for their ass on the Monday or Tuesday. Got to get a better time, got to get better. The intent's great, but they're pissing in the wind. Rather, the further away from the sport we are, the less your training should look like the sport. Okay? With that in mind, the accumulation phase is development of aerobic base. So chill here. That's not to say that it should be easy, but the paces should be maintainable and repeatable. We call that flow. In accumulation, we should be practicing skills. We're in a great scenario to do so. We're increasing our aerobic capacity. We're increasing the ability to deliver oxygen to the brain and to our muscles. Therefore, we're increasing our capacity to learn new skills, refine new skills, and manage development of muscle endurance. Win-win. Think about the alternative. You push too hard here. You're into sugar burning. Brain is starved of oxygen. Energy focus is on surviving and recovering. From that, not refining skills and not developing capacity. Equals no development of that whole thing. What do you think progress looks at the other end? Zero. So patience here is the key. Also, as an awareness piece for your client, it's worth stating that this is our stab at Hyrox right now. Does this look like this attempt is going to be your ultimate performance at Hyrox, your absolute max potential? The answer will be yes or no. Likely no, because that yes is going to be a very fine peak period in their existence when they're able. And if it's no, we just manage expectations. Yes, we're looking for progress. Yes, we're not looking to spin our wheels. But this attempt at doing Hyrox in this block of progression is part of many blocks that will lead towards a maximum expression in this sport, probably further down the line. Think about the best in this sport now. They have a prerequisite, they have a foundation of all the elements that are required in those KPIs in order to express this shit right now. This is easy for them. They can just go there. Think about Hunter. Think about what he does. We try and train at his pace because it looks like that's what we need to do to get better, to be at his level. The requirement, and here's the kicker. It used to be the same in CrossFit when everybody looks at Rich Froning. What does Rich do? I'm going to do the same because that will get me there. No, it won't. That's for them. They're at a level way beyond. And actually, the stuff that they're doing, it's accumulation. It's accumulation of capacity. It's capacity work. It just looks so fast to us because it's so far beyond what most of us are capable. That doesn't mean, so it doesn't translate to we need to be that intense. That relative intensity for those people at the top of the sport is the same at where we should be training at. It's just that the expression between ours and theirs and our clients and theirs likely is going to be different. So the fact remains, aerobic base that allows us to practice skills and actually ingrain the things. It also it allows us to refine our pacing. So that's intuition around the feelings of aerobic capacity work, but also our intuition around making calls depending on how we feel based on all of the variables around us on that particular day in order to maintain the stimulus of flow, not to get lost in sugar burning just because we're going after an abstract pace. Like, no, I'm not going to go there today because I clearly haven't got it in me. This is my pace for today, and that's okay. If I stay here, I'm developing my aerobic capacity. If I go there, I'm ticking the box as far as numbers are concerned, but I'm actually moving into a different stimulus. I'm into survival mode. No bueno. That's not going to help. Also in accumulation, we're looking to develop muscle endurance. That's volume. So volume here should be high, relatively high for the client. Again, to the point, there's a functional volume within Hyrox. So there's going to be a level of volume here that becomes a diminishing return. This isn't like CrossFit, where anything could come up, where we need to train for the unknowable. We know what we're up for. So we don't need to run a marathon in order to be good at Hyrox. We don't need to be able to do 150 wall balls unbroken to be able to do the amount in Hyrox. We don't need to lunge walk 100 kilos on our back for 100 meters in order to express what's in Hyrox. Stick closer to what the functional volume of the sport is, and everything else is a waste. And that waste, the reason why it's a waste is because it will put into question the client's ability to recover. And remember that that's the key, because any expression here is not complete and ingrained until it's recovered from. So any junk shit that we put in that might be like, oh, this will be cool, this will be fun, you're limiting the potential to recover and adapt. Stop it. So developing muscle endurance and volume, but only volume to that point where it doesn't become diminishing return. And then in accumulation, if required, we would use this to develop strength where necessary. Okay? And again, there'll be a point of diminishing returns. Now, we don't want to spend too much time there if the focus is on Hyrox. Now, if this is participation, and Hyrox is just a piece of the puzzle, and strength would like to be continued to build by the client alongside what they're doing, then you need to manage this whole thing accordingly. We know that aerobic capacity, so flow and strength, form, they're good pals. The two can work well together. Start doing any force work, anaerobic, sugar burning in the middle, that's going to take away from both pillars. So depending on where the client is, what their priorities are, we can shape that accumulation phase to suit. Intensification follows. So this is where we start to become more sport specific. We'll probably be getting closer to the competition here. Probably between 6 and 4 weeks out, 6 and 2 weeks out, depending on the client, depending on their capacity, something like a 3 to 4 week intensification phase, where we start to get more specific. The sport-specific piece here will be paces within the sport and requirements of. So to the note there, we start to increase the intensity and we get closer to threshold. Here as well, we also start to introduce force training. And this is for performance. Now, those of you that have been in our system, done FFC, you'll know what I'm talking about with force. It's the middle pillar I just alluded to, sugar burning. Potent is a benefit, and potent is also a negative. We need to be careful as to where we put it. If we do too much force, it will negatively flavor the whole thing. So we want to dose this carefully. Okay? Very quickly on force. There's a prerequisite of strength required to actually express it in the first instance. So if you're working on strength for Hyrox in accumulation, chances are that that individual won't be able to express force anyway. So don't waste time there. Go after some higher levels of intensity, but just know that they probably won't be able to express force. Remember that Force is only here to be able to flirt with that top line of threshold. That's all this is for. We're trying to eke out those extra percentages, those extra little bits of capacity at that top level. So we can get a feel for its importance. Remember, we're talking in 50 to 90 minutes here. Again, this isn't CrossFit. There's not going to be a 6 to 8 minute shitfest where you're predominantly going to be sugar burning. And you're probably going to need more of this thing. We need enough to be able to manage that threshold piece at the top if we get our paces wrong, okay? The more that we refine this thing, the more aerobic we get, and therefore the faster we can operate whilst maintaining and repeating. I would argue the less requirement for force there is, okay? But still, the intensification phase should see an increase in intensity and therefore, as a rule, generally, a reduction in volume. Into pre-comp. So this is probably like the week before, maybe 2 weeks for those who are experienced. And again, it depends on the client, where they're up to in their competency, in their Hyrox experience specifically. But here, the pre-comp is to sharpen the axe. So everything that we've worked on here, we're not going to get fitter in this phase. We're trying to refine. So pre-comp is refinement. It's confidence building. So what we don't want to do in pre-comp is give something to our client that's going to hand them their ass and think that they're not ready. Back to the point before about understanding where this process, this period of training sits in the bigger shooting match. There'll be a level within this that we can work. And if we're working towards a maximum expression somewhere further down the line, then what we're looking for here in this pre-comp, we should be building confidence about what's possible now, not then. So careful with that. Again, think about how specific that needs to be for each individual, probably depending on how the first 2 phases have gone. So throughout this whole thing, there should be a reinvestigation and integration going on to refine this program. To my point before, if you're writing an 8 to 12 week Hyrox program and giving it your client on week 1 and then meeting them at Hyrox on week 12 and expecting the whole thing to have gone swimmingly, you're fucking deluded. This whole thing, the delivery of it, requires coaching. We need to notice. We need feedback. We need the client to take responsibility for that. Of course you can do that. You can send the program out. Of course you can. And if that's your business, your system, and that's what you're doing, sending a program out, we just have to manage our expectations in it. Because what we're talking about here on this call is coaching our clients towards their best performances. So just understand the limitations of firing a program out and expecting it to stick. Because by the time we get to pre-comp, we should be clear on what should be in here to sharpen the axe. Like, what do we need to refine? What can we really get out of this 1 to 2 weeks? Where do we need to build confidence? What do we need to practice? And then the big piece there, comp's just around the corner. So we need to manage recovery. Again, at this point, I saw in the gym I train in, she's a lovely lady. She does a lot of Hyrox. She had a competition. She was doing the Manchester one on the Sunday. And on the Friday, she was handing herself her ass. She was doing a Hyrox sim the 2 days before. Right? She had great intentions. She was like, I just need to get just this last little bit. I mean, it's not for me to say. She's not my client. I don't know what's going on, so I don't know why she was doing it. I did said, oh, you just done a full Hyrox there? She's like, yeah. I said, are you not able to do it this weekend? Or like, oh no, I'm competing on Sunday. I was like, all right, okay. Good luck with that. Because what we want to be doing here is maximizing recovery so that when it gets to comp day, not only do your clients feel great in the things that you've been doing pre-comp, but they feel ready to get after it. They're full of beans, ready to go. They're not in survival mode. Dead on their feet as they reach the start line. So managing recovery is a big piece. Then comps, let's go. It's the beauty of Hyrox. You're in and out in 2 hours. Great. Nice and simple. I say it's simple in comparison to the sport that I've spent a lot of time around over the last however many years. In CrossFit, we have to manage event after event and nutrition within it, etc., etc. So this, again, it's fixed. Get in, express yourself, get out. So let's go. Armed with everything that you've worked with over that period of time. This is what it looks like. Your base phase should be the biggest piece. Your accumulation. Most time should be spent there. Over your Hyrox camps, if you call it, every time you train for a Hyrox, the more time you can spend in accumulation, and therefore the more refinement of movement, the more development of your aerobic system, the better the whole thing is going to become. The potential is going to go up and up and up. So the broader the base, the higher the potential. As an idea, and this is just a generalization, so please don't take this as read, but just as an idea around timeframes. Unless you're particularly advanced as an athlete, or as your client's particularly advanced as an athlete, in which case that accumulation phase should be massive, like most of the year. And we should be being careful with how many competitions we do, because their ability to express and be intense is super high. So we don't want to burn them, okay? But generally speaking, the time that we've got in pre-comp and intensification, so it's going to be between 4 to 6 weeks, probably for that. If it's a 4-week intensification phase into a 2-week comp prep, or it might be a 3-week intensification phase into a 1-week comp prep, your accumulation phase should be at least the sum of both of those. Okay? So if it's 6 weeks in total, your accumulation phase should be at least 6 weeks. If it's 4 weeks in total, your accumulation phase should be at least 4 weeks. That makes sense? Again, that's going to be somewhat dictated by the time frame that you've got to work within. But you can manage expectations with the client around that. If they've booked a competition in 3 weeks' time, it's like, okay, we can do what we can do, but let's just manage participation at this point. There's only so much we can do in the next 3 weeks. And then maybe we sign up for one in 6 months' time. And then we can get some real good work done. So whilst I say at least for that accumulation phase, the same thing remains. The longer we can spend there, the broader we can develop the aerobic base, the more refined we can make the skills, the more we can stretch out and challenge that muscle endurance, the better. With aerobic being a big key, we want to think about flow as teaching the body to be as efficient as possible. Efficient for a long period of time, and eventually increasing speeds across the months and years. This is actually from Josh Davies. He talked about this in his athlete camp on Saturday. But efficiency is the key, as we mentioned right at the start in the KPIs. And that leads us back to thinking about the time spent here in this accumulation phase. This is where we're going to refine efficiency. This is where we're going to be recovering really well. General stress load is going to be low. Oxygen to the brain is going to be high. Oxygen to your muscles is going to be high. Fuel intake is going to be bang on. Lifestyle factors are going to be dialed in. You're going to be feeling great. And therefore, your ability to become efficient in this thing is through the roof. That's the time. So if we're thinking about trying to teach the body to be as efficient as possible, it must lead our mind to that fact. We're aiming to spend as much time there in accumulation as possible. That means in order to do that, we must train at our own aerobic paces and gradually increase them over time. not continually test them. Despite our temptations, we all know it, we've all fucked it. Oh, I'm feeling good today. I think I'll just push this. And then a little further into it, you're like, uh-oh, I can't hold this for this long. I'm now moving into sugar burning. This is not ideal for my development of aerobic capacity. That would be testing. That would be survival. I put a post on the other day from an athlete from Hard Work Pays Off who was saying exactly the same. He then went on to explain the benefit of what I'm talking about here in developing the intuition, the skill of pacing, so that we get the most out of competition, because competition can't be a fly and die. That's not what we're going to get the best. So it's training at our own paces. Again, back to that point, I won't keep hammering it too much, but in this camp, in this process towards our test, this is part of probably multiple processes and camps towards a maximum expression over time. So watch your aerobic pace now, and it will be developed over upcoming expressions and camps. The more we continue to test them, the less development we're going to see. Simple as that. I put this post on the other day. True flow expression requires maintenance of a power output at a repeatable pace. Hence, low work to rest ratios. For those that don't know, if you're not in our system, if you've not done FFC, if we see a piece where the rest is less than the work, that must be flow in nature. It must be aerobic. Otherwise, the recovery is not sufficient to recover from the expression and then repeat. So if it's less than the work, aerobic, flow. That's true expression of. Also, true expression requires maintenance of power output at a non-repeatable pace. That's force. So even if we're training the anaerobic system, the output still needs to be maintained. It's not repeatable across multiple sets, and that's why we have a longer work-rest ratio. So if you see a piece that says 30 minutes work and 3.5 minutes rest, times 4 to 6, know that you're doing some threshold sugary shit. Dig in, but the aim of the game is to maintain your pace and your output across that 30-second piece. Because aiming to express either of those, whether it be flow or force, with reducing power output, whether that be in a force or a flow setting, is survival. That's testing. And that's neither here nor there as far as its use in developing fitness. Now, it might tell us a little bit about ourselves, sure. It might give us some feedback into our intuition, sure. But same as we're not going to get any development of our potential or capacity physically from doing Hyrox, it's the same thing. We're going to get insights, sure, in our mind as to how we can refine our pacing, how we can approach certain elements of it. Absolutely. But as far as developing any fitness or capacity, that's not going to come from the test. The test is the test. And so we need to be clear. This is training. Everything that goes on in here is training. Okay? We're managing recovery. We're refining our ability to shuttle lactate in the threshold pieces. Get it out so we can go again. Get it out so we can go again. The only way we're going to do that is by managing the work-rest ratio. Managing paces within it. Same with the flow. Generally speaking, the higher the aerobic capacity, the greater your ability to express faster speeds and maintain them. It goes all the way back to the start when we tried to define what Hyrox is. It's low skill. There's nothing in there that's generally tricky. So everything within it should start to feel like an erg. It should be like wall balls, lunges, farmer's carry. Like it should feel the same. That's where we were aiming to get to. So the whole thing feels like an aerobic expression. That's what it is. So the greater our capacity then, the quicker we can go in this thing and maintain that pace. The closer we get to the Hunters of the world. When you watch Hunter do a partner one with somebody that isn't as fit as him, you only have to look at the difference between them at the finish line. Hunter's probably chatting and chewing the fat. Yeah, he's pissing with sweat and he's out of breath. He's worked hard. Of course he has. But whoever he's done it with is flat on the back. They're surviving. Right? Kudos to those people for going there, for pushing in that testing situation. That's what we want. We want you to be able to push. But as an outcome, as a potential piece, we're going to see the reality of our potential by being as aerobic as possible. So for as much of that time frame as we can, we stay just below threshold. And we're whirring up there. And we're in control. We're refining our pacing through our intuition in each piece. Breathing throughout the whole thing. And then if need be, we go there. Okay? Okay. I've gone over the hour. I usually do. Questions in the chat box. Peter, could forced pieces still be included during the accumulation phase? Yes. Yes, they could. Just carefully. And we'd have to be clear on the intention around them. Okay? We'd also have to be clear on where they fit in that season, in that little camp. And is it useful? But you could do. For the accumulation phase, those would be shorter in duration. So any force pieces in that accumulation phase would be super short. And you just have to be careful with, remember, we're looking to develop, remember the ideals there, or the focuses of accumulation. Development of flow, development of form. So too much force, and we take away from the other two. So yes, it can. I won't say no, but just be careful with how you implement that. And keep your eye on it. So the markers there would be, again, the ability to recover. And you're looking for the ability to recover from the main pieces, form and flow. If you're impacting that, I'd take it out. Wouldn't be worth it. Cool, cool, cool. Sam, how long would you say on average should be spent in each phase? Did I... okay, so I mentioned that before. So, just a sec. Folks, can you mute, please? As a minimum. Okay. So as a minimum, the accumulation phase should be as long as the intensification phase plus the pre-comp plus comp as a minimum. But if you've got time on your hands, then make that accumulation phase as long as possible. Mikey, are we able to grab these slides? No. You'll get the recording of this call though. I'll be dead honest, Mike. The reason you won't get these slides is because everybody will want them and I can't be asked sending them to everybody. So you'll get the recording. You can screenshot the slides. I hope that's okay. Peter, currently using them for online clients. Oh, sorry. Was this in relation to before? So just a sec. Oh, force. Currently using them for online clients who are competing in 5 months' time. Only including force on once per week as accumulating more flow aerobic work just now. Just checking. Yeah, okay. Like I say, just check recovery. And general principles, stick that force piece if you feel it's important for the client's development right before a rest day, so that it will have less of an impact on everything else. Okay? kick the week off with that piece, and it's going to flavor the whole thing too much. So, man, alongside the performance KPIs, is there any health metrics you would get clients to focus on, such as resting heart rate or VO2 max? Nah. I mean, you as a coach in practice, fine, right? As a general progression for coaching practice, that's fine. But for Hyrox development, use Hyrox as the outcome. Don't forget, I mentioned, if we're going after performance, we have to let go of some healthy lifestyle stuff. So careful not to delude ourselves that we can get both at the same time. We can't, and we shouldn't be saying such to the client. Okay? So if we continue to improve their aerobic fitness, we will naturally see a reduction in that resting heart rate over time, which is great. So if we're doing this training well, that'll just happen anyway. So they would be your markers. Is this person getting more aerobic? i.e., can they do more in the same space of time? Check resting heart rate, sure. I just question your intent around that, really. But yeah, if you want. Doesn't really relate to Hyrox for me, though. Is there space scope for a taper phase? Good point, Charles. Yes, there is, depending on the individual. You could include that in that pre-comp or after it. Again, back to the client and their own unique needs. Some people like to train all the way up to the day and actually feel mentally wise a little bit off if they've had too much time off, if they've tapered too much. So they feel a little bit lethargic. It's like, oh, am I even ready? So yes, it can be for those and where it's useful. But again, just test that thing. And it might be that if they've not got a lot of experience in Hyrox and they're planning to do a few, it might be one campaign. You say, should we try tapering and see how that impacts performance? So play with that, investigate that, but then check the outcomes and monitor that stuff. Alice, can you talk to the risk of injuries or avoiding injuries during intensification pre-comp? Speaking from personal experience, whenever training intensifies, I deal with niggles. I want to avoid them with my own clients. I understand need. I'm going to be dead direct. If you're getting injured in intensification, it's because the movement quality that you've been meant to have been building in accumulation has been a bit shit. So only intensify that which is dialed in. Simple principles. Okay? So it's a direct feedback loop. If the skill's breaking down under intensity, you've not refined said skill. It doesn't deserve intensity yet. Simple. So risk of injury is a feedback loop around for a poor accumulation phase. So more time is required in the skill. I know you won't take that personally. Suggested training splits for phases. Footnotes, mate. Client, who plus Y plus what equals how? What have they got? What resources have they got? Time to train, etc., etc. That's the key. I could go through all the splits in the world. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday on, Thursday off, Friday, Saturday gold. The only one thing I would say is the encouragement to train on a Saturday, just for general rhythm. We want them to get used to expressing something on a Saturday so that it actually aligns with the expression of this on comp day. Other than that, then it's in and around the client. So it'd be remiss of me to say training this way, because there's a chance then of you thinking, right, I need to get all my clients doing this despite what their resources are. Okay. So client first. How do you manage training volume of Hyrox skills within program design through phases? So this would just be general principles of progression. I mean, let's face it, the skills are simple. It's low skill. Chris, this isn't at you, but just as a general thought process. We don't need to overthink this. If we don't know how to progress the skills that sit within Hyrox, we probably shouldn't be coaching Hyrox. Like, it's pretty fucking basic. So, Chris, I know you know that, right? So just think about it. volume of those skills, like where are they at? How many lunge steps can they take with said weight? So rather than going, right, I can do 20 now, so next week we can do 60, maybe let's do 25 next week. Can you recover from that? Are we good? Has the movement held up? Movement quality throughout? Win. Let's try 30, and so on and so forth. You know the drill. So, man, during the intensification, is fatigue expected? Yep. In terms of fatigue, as in readiness for the fourth session? Yeah. Yep. But remember, this is still training. So that's why intensification phase, we reduce the volume to suit. So fatigue is expected, 100%, but we reduce volume in order to manage recovery. All right. The worst thing to do would be in intensification phase would be to think, I'm going to increase the intensity, and I'm going to keep the same volume. That's when you'll burn folk. So careful with, I'm burning you, but I don't care because this is sport. Now you can take that line, but it won't be useful. In intensification, again, so far out from competition, you're in danger of heading them towards a peak there too early. And as they say, don't peak too soon. So manage that fatigue through reduced volume. And also markers of health for the client. How are they showing up each day? Are they ready? Because we're still training. That was my point before about doing too much testing. Cormac, with group training up to 16, how might you structure an hour session within accumulation phase in order to best achieve the outcome as appropriate for each client? You can't. As 15 wall balls for each client will differ. Exactly. That's up to you and your skill to manage, my man. I can't help you with that. There are limitations of group as to how close we can get to the individualization of the prescription. Simple as that. It doesn't make group right or wrong. It just means that we have to manage our expectations around it. Okay? Now, the more you progress in your ability to coach and your ability to coach those large numbers, the more efficient you'll be to refining those prescriptions for each of those individuals. But that's on you and your ability. So there isn't a set rule as to how you might approach that. Okay? That's nothing against group. It's just the reality of the thing. Roger that. Cool. All good? Hope that was of use. Thanks for your time. Thanks for stretching my brain on this thing. Sweet. See you all soon. Thanks very much. See you, Sash.